So energy, the big things that you'll need to know for this is that things that are providing energy is carbohydrates, lipids, and protein. And energy is the product of oxidation. Do you know what oxidation is? Have you learned that yet in chemistry?
Yeah, we just went over that today. I've been doing chapter 3, that's chapter 4 stuff. It's something with bonding. I know it's something with bonding, but I can't.
Where oxygen attaches to the sites
But
and
it's
it
it,
breaks
isn't
it
it?
down.
It's typically where oxygen becomes available. So usually if you have to choose between reduced and oxidized compound, the oxidized compound is without a hydrogen and the reduced compound is with the hydrogen. Oxidation for nutrition and metabolism purposes is always the catabolism or the breakdown of compounds. So oxidation is the catabolism of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So the only things that are resulting in the release of energy is oxidation and only our macronutrients, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. So our minerals and vitamins do not contribute at all to energy. In general, an animal's going to eat to meet its energy requirements. So what does that mean? That means that regardless, you could be deficient in calcium right now, and you're not going to seek out something that has calcium in it to make sure you meet your daily requirement of calcium. You're going to eat to meet your energy requirements. Only in the cases of severe deficiency will you see what we call nutritional wisdom. So nutritional wisdom is where an animal is going out to eat compounds to meet its requirements. So that's where if an animal is severely deficient, let's say in calcium, that's where you'll have an animal that's normally an obligate herbivore, and it will, let's say cattle, they'll go, if they're deficient in calcium, they'll go and stomp on a rabbit and eat it to try and get the calcium from the bones, right? You'll get, or you'll see them eating more inert materials to try and meet those requirements, but that's only when they're severely deficient. Outside of that, you're eating for your energy requirements. So our whole idea is to try and get accurate estimations of how much energy. So this big E in these brackets, that means the concentration of energy. So we want to get accurate estimations of the concentration of energy within feedstuffs, so we can estimate the daily feed intake that an animal is, or the amount of energy they're consuming every day. That's what we're doing with the bomb calorimetry. So we don't run bombs on every feed ingredient before we make a diet, or from a diet after we make it, before we feed it to the animal. We're going to use the published information from the books, and that's where we're getting the estimation. So each lot of corn, each lot of soybean meal, they're gonna vary a little bit in their nutrient composition and their energy availability. So we're getting a good estimate, but we're not getting the actual how many calories they've taken in per se. So the bomb calorimeter, I think I talked about this earlier too, so this is just another one. We have this water jacket, and this stainless steel container. You put in approximately 1 gram of your compound, fill this with oxygen, and light it on fire. So we send an electrical current through there. What happens when you mix an electrical current with oxygen? It's going to explode. So the oxygen is providing the oxidative component. Without those electrons going through here, nothing's going to happen. So you need those electrons with the oxygen, and then you'll have that explosion. That explosion is going to make heat, right? And that heat transfers to the water, and we're going to get the change in water temperature. So we have this outside jacket and this inside jacket, and we're going to, initially these two are the same temperature, and this inside jacket of water is going to increase the temperature. We're going to measure that difference in water temperature, and that's going to give us how many calories. Do you guys know the definition of a calorie? Did I tell you that yet?
One gram of water.
1 gram of water. How much volume is 1 gram of water? 1 milliliter. So 1 gram, 1 milliliter is all the same. So you put in 200, or not 200, 2,000 milliliters or 2 liters of water, and we can then do the calculation. And there are some faculty in this department that have a bomb cover that are old school. Well, you have the old school thermometers that you have to read and record it beforehand and calibrate it, and then we have the other ones that are automatic, and you just push a button and 5 minutes later it gives you a value. So there's different ways to do things. I like the easier ones, the machines, but they cost a lot of money. So again, we talked about this before, but our energy, typically we're going to have it in either kcals or megacals. For our poultry or fish, we're going to primarily be kcals. The mcals are more for our big ruminants. And we start off with gross energy, as I have here. So GE is our gross energy. We take our fecal energy out. That gives us our digestible energy. We account for our urine, or our gas, or our gills. So we really, with fish and poultry, we don't worry about the gas so much, but with fish we need to account for gills and the urine for poultry, and that's going to give us our metabolizable energy. So that's, because any of the waste products, anything that we've broken down is going to end up in the urine. So we need to account for, typically those compounds still have a lot of energy available to them. So accounting for that gives us how much was metabolized. And then we have this heat of assimilation or heat increment, and this is the heat that's produced while you're eating. So it's helping maintain your core body temperature. Accounting for that will give us our net energy, and our net energy will break it down into maintenance and production. Now, with this poultry, we're going to do more metabolizable energy. Fish is more digestible energy. At least the old books that I have are digestible energy. I don't know if they've moved on into metabolizable energy. Ideally, so the more you move down this chain, the more accurate you are at meeting the animal's energy requirement. So the more that you account for, the more accurate you're going to be. And then we can break it up. Maintenance is just our basal metabolic rate. Production is what we need on top of that to grow. So if you were looking at us, if you were in a coma, this is just how much energy you need to keep you alive during a coma. If we didn't want the animal to grow, we would just feed this maintenance level. So this is kind of the whole idea of trying to lose weight, is that you eat more along this amount that's going to be closer to your basal metabolic rate, and the activity that you end up doing, you're going to end up having to burn your reserves off, and that's going to help you lose weight. So you can go through and do the bomb on the fecal and the urine. To get the heat, you've got to put them in some sort of box to estimate the heat production. But if you look at the calories on your food, did I talk about the 494 rule yet? So we have this is, yeah, I did. So this is going to be how many calories that you're going to find within, how many grams of lipid, protein, and carbohydrate. You do that math and it's going to get pretty dang close. Why do people that drink a lot of beer get the beer gut?
Carbs.
Yeah, that's true.
Takes a long time to break it down.
Carbs, what else is on there?
It's closer to the cake count.
Why are people drinking beer?
Keep drunk.
What? To get drunk. What's making you drunk?
Alcohol.
The alcohol. So, why, when y'all came to college and you, of course, I know it wasn't you for it all, you're all good kids. The devil's juice never crossed your lips until Tyler became 21, then he was allowed to. The rest of you, you are not a heathen. You're not going to let the devil's juice, right? Why do some of the heathen students gain 15 pounds their freshman year?
Alcohol?
Alcohol.
I lost 5 pounds.
I put on 30.
It's just because it's cold.
So you have the potential of drinking alcohol, you're still going to gain weight. Now, I've gotten in this argument with a friend of mine when I was in grad school, and they decided that they were going to lose weight, and one of the things that they were going to do is they switched from beer to liquor.
I was going to ask, does that work?
Well, if your beer is 6% alcohol, so,
And your liquor's 35.
and your liquor is how much alcohol?
35%.
35%? I always
That's
thought.
like a 70 proof bar.
But it's about average.
Yeah, that's about it.
I don't drink liquor, I just assumed it was 100% alcohol. So, if you end up consuming the same amount per volume, what's going to cause you to gain more weight? The beer or the liquor?
Probably just based on alcohol would be the liquor, but there's other stuff in here?
Well, you get the carbohydrates. So you'll still have the carbohydrates, but so the carbohydrates, you have 4 kcals per gram of carbohydrates. And then you add the alcohol component that still has 7. So if you're drinking, let's say, there was one sound clip back in the day, I think it was like from a Super Bowl. I just have this thing that they interviewed some woman on the street and she's completely drunk, and they asked her what she was drinking, and she said, a 5th of Hennessy. So if you drink a 5th of Hennessy, which is,
$750.
yeah, so you drink a whole thing of that.
Now.
We don't know our measurements
Now.
until now.
Compared to 2 pints of beer, what's going to have more?
Oh, definitely, Hennessy.
Right, so if you're drinking that much, poor liver, you're gonna end up, the person that I had this argument with, they also are known for when they drink whiskey, they are not good at controlling themselves. So they drink whiskey and then they get thirsty and they drink more whiskey as opposed to switching to water.
So it's
Yeah,
like
that's a good
tequila song.
Right.
I know what I was thinking.
So why do the heathen freshman gain all this weight? This component is the alcohol consumption.
That's why we maintained our figures last year.
So how do you determine that heat of increment? Now this is one of the ones that they had originally, so this was in the 1800s. They put a guinea pig and this is a block of ice.
Sounds like something I do in the 1800s.
I don't remember the guy's name that did this, but so he carved out this ice and he had, the tops, and so as they would go and get ice. You ever see the movie Frozen?
Yeah,
You see the beginning of it,
Yeah.
how they're taking ice out of the lake?
yeah.
Oh, so he had
That's
to wait
really what
until
they
the
did.
winter.
That's what they did.
Oh, I thought that was like some Disney thing, okay.
No.
Sometimes there are.
You wanna know why Chicago, it was in the 1800s, why they were the meat packing center of the nation?
Yeah.
Because they had Lake Michigan, and they would go and get there were ice farmers, and then they had the rail system, so they would fill the rails with ice from Lake Michigan, and then put the meat on the trains and take it everywhere.
Oh, yeah, the
So what they
Saints.
do, you just put ice all at the very bottom of the lake? Like, I'm trying to figure out how you make ice out of,
Winter's
Have
fun.
have you been to Chicago?
When it's cold and it's
what
snowing.
are you gonna do in the summertime?
You don't.
Well, this was, they had ice boxes, so they would still have insulated,
Have raisins, so.
they would, you get a bunch of ice and you just keep it in an insulated room, and it would
That's why
keep
we
it.
grew the gardens in the summertime.
Nice. Isn't the same like trying to sell ice to an Eskimo? Or is it ice in Alaska? One of the two.
Ice to an Eskimo.
Ice to an Eskimo. So, this guy, he put a guinea pig in this ice chamber and measured the amount of water that came off as the animal ate. Now, obviously, this is not the best way, but it was a start to give us some of the information. Because you put an animal in a block of ice, what's it gonna do to it?
Freezing.
So you're gonna affect its core body temperature, so it now has to work harder. So it now, to keep its core body temperature up, it needs to burn more energy. What else do you think has happened to the animal?
Probably really stressed.
It's really stressed, so we've
Dark box.
we've affected the cortisol, so this isn't the best model, but it was a start. So now that you guys are all on your way to becoming animal nutritionists, how would you improve upon this model?
Guinea pig in a nice box.
But you still want to figure out how much energy it takes to digest things. So what would you do?
Put it in a steel box with a thermometer inside, and then when you start eating, if the thermometer should go up.
There you go. So that's another way. So that's called, this is indirect calorimetry. So another way that you can do it is looking at your CO2 and your oxygen that you produce. We do have, somewhere I have pictures of, they make these little things for animals that you can try and get how much doing indirect calorimetry. When I was in undergrad and in grad school, I always participated in human studies. So you ever try and run with one of those contraptions on your head, it's really not too comfortable or fun. But you can do indirect calorimetry, and then you have direct calorimetry, which is putting it in that room. Usually they're not stainless steel boxes anymore with the plexiglass, but it's still the same theory, and then you measure the temperature difference as the animal's eating. You can also, from those boxes, get the amount of oxygen and CO2 that are produced.
Yeah, you could have run out of oxygen, they could have killed it, didn't
Where's this? Where's this?
Oh my God, we don't know.
So when we have, talking about energy, we want, for our animals at maintenance, so if we have roosters, toms, any animals that isn't growing, that should be at maintenance, we want energy balance. So our energy in should equal our energy out. So that means your maintenance, everything's even. Positive energy balance is, for the most part, animals that we're talking about, we want a positive energy balance. We either want them to be growing or we want them producing eggs, something. So they should all be at a positive energy balance with the exception of the males, because really it doesn't cost that much energy to make semen. And then negative energy balance is really what we are trying to avoid. So this is typically indicating that there's some sort of illness. Unless, of course, you're trying to lose weight, and then you're also trying to instigate this negative energy balance. But as animal nutritionists, this is what we're trying to avoid. And typically when we have this negative energy balance due to illness, what ends up getting broken down in the animal?
Fat?
Muscle, when it's due to illness, because they're going to stop eating and they're going to be breaking down that lean tissue to make glucose. Where if you have, let's say if you have a horse or something that you're trying to get it to lose weight, then you're going to be monitoring it and trying to get it to lose the fat and not the muscle. So all of our adult males should be at a neutral energy balance. Everything else we want at a positive energy balance. So this is kind of looking at how temperature affects our energy requirement. So when it's really cold, we have, it takes more energy, so that's this red line. Takes more energy to maintain everything. And here we have our intake energy, so we have to eat more, and more of that's just going to maintaining our current state. As we get to our normal temperature, so about 25 degrees Celsius, what temperature is 25 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit? No. Nope. Do you know, Tyler? Nope.
60 or 65.
What's your ideal temperature that you set your thermometer to?
72.
68.
68. So 25 degrees Celsius is about 65, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't remember off the top of my head. 35 degrees Celsius, how hot is that?
About 80,
This is
75.
about 95. So you can see here, so here we have positive energy. When we start getting way out here, we're going to start having our negative energy, being in a negative energy state. And again, we kind of have this, our maintenance goes back up even at hot temperatures. It's not quite the same as low temperatures, but this is because we're now starting it takes more energy to maintain our protein turnover and everything. So we're going to start breaking things down, trying to maintain everything. But at the same time, when it's really hot, what don't you want to do?
You don't wanna eat.
You don't wanna
Very
eat.
well.
So this is where you run the risk. So your metabolic energy goes up because you're having a hard time dissipating your heat, but you're not eating as much. So you run the risk of getting a negative energy balance. You guys have any questions on that? Okay, we will. So, some of this more review. So our carbohydrates, again, as we said, they're made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The majority of our carbohydrates that we're consuming are the structural components of plants, and those are formed during photosynthesis. So what's photosynthesis?
It's when plants eat, use energy from the sun, rain, and glucose.
So when they use the sun, what organelle does that occur in? Do you remember?
It's
When it compares
chlorophyll.
The chlorophyll. So photosynthesis occurs, so where they take the CO2 and the energy, so this kcals, so CO2, water, and this energy from the sun, and they're able to convert that to glucose and oxygen. So the majority of the diets that we formulate are going to be 50 to 75% of carbohydrates. So if you think about when we made our basil, what was the primary thing that we put in our diet on Friday? Corn. What's the primary carbohydrate that you're going to find in corn? Starch. So I always have this argument, primarily with my husband, okay? I like to, when we have dinner, have a vegetable with every dinner. Guess what vegetable he likes to have us eat?
Corn.
Corn. Is corn a vegetable?
No.
No, it's a cereal. So, that's just his Midwestern roots. So we grew up on meat, potatoes, and corn. But that's primarily providing starch. Starch is the main carbohydrate and energy source. So sugars, starches, and cellulose. Starch is easily digested. So this, it's a simple starch here because it's easily digested, but if true simple carbohydrates are going to be pure glucose, pure fructose. Those don't really need to be digested, they can just be absorbed. But our starch is going to be the main energy for swine and poultry. And even in your cheap fish diets, they're going to put more starch. But most fish are obligate carnivores, so you need to have more protein in there. Our complex carbohydrates, which are fibers, cellulose, are not easily digested. You need the microbial breakdown. So our hindgut fermenters, or this is a ruminant, is our foregut fermenter. Our foregut fermenters are the most efficient utilizers of our cellulose because the microbes are breaking it down before it goes through the GI tract. Poultry are hindgut fermenters, so they are not as efficient, but they can utilize some of it. So we have our two classes, so our fibrous, which contain cellulose. Those are going to be our hays, alfalfa, our hulls. We really we don't use these at all in poultry. Sometimes as a bedding. So here on the East Coast and in the Midwest, do you guys know the main litter source, what we use for litter?
Concrete.
So it's gonna be the wood shavings that's primarily coming from the pine trees. What about in California?
It's weird.
Redwood shavings?
No. It's a byproduct of,
Like almond husk or something.
no, rice hulls.
Right.
So the outer component of rice, because they grow a lot of rice in California, so we use rice hulls. So the poultry can, you'll see you'll see a lot of rice hulls in the GI tract, but that's fiber. Our readily available things include milo, corn, barley, wheat. Those are cereal grains. The primary one that we're using in the US is what?
Corn?
Corn. What about in Europe?
Is it barley? Or, it's not corn, they don't grow corn, really.
It's wheat. They're gonna use more wheat in Europe. So we have our monosaccharides, which are simple sugars, and these we've talked about already. So we have 6 carbon rings, or those that have 6 carbons. So glucose, fructose, galactose, mannose are all 6 carbons. Now, within these, glucose uses 5 carbons to make up the ring, fructose uses 4, galactose and mannose uses 5 carbons to make up their rings. So the big thing is fructose only uses 4 of the carbons to make up its ring, so it looks more like a pentose when you draw it. But we do have pentoses, which are 5 carbons, and those are arabinose and xylose. Interesting, so you guys ever use Trident gum? So what's one of the benefits why your dentist is okay with you using Trident gum?
Produces saliva.
It's not just because it produces saliva. Because if it was between like Big League Chew or whatever,
Less sugar?
the sugar, but why are they okay with Trident gum? It's not because it has less sugar.
Yeah, xylose.
Because it has xylose, so it uses the type of sugar xylitol. So that you guys can't break down, and it's actually toxic to the bacteria that cause cavities in your mouth, compared to if you were to chew like Big League Chew or whatever gum. I don't remember all the gums that my kids like to.
Or double bubble.
Yes. They have the bubble tape, and I don't know what else my in-laws gave them for Christmas that they have all over the house. We have our disaccharides, which have 2 sugar molecules linked together. So the most common one that you're gonna think of is sucrose, and this is also known as table sugar. So that's a glucose and a fructose together. You have maltose, and maltose is also referred to as dextrose. So this is the crystallized form of maltose. Where would you guys see, or what things do you consume that you would see it listed as dextrose? Not food coloring, but it is colorful. first place that developed it is a university in Florida,
Gatorade.
Gatorade. So they use dextrose, because that's easy to break down. So dextrose is the same as maltose. And then you have lactose, which is glucose and galactose. Now, our poultry and our fish aren't going to, they can't digest lactose very well. Why do you think they can't break down lactose well?
They don't have a true stomach.
It's not because of that.
It's not really natural in their habitat.
It's not natural in their habitat. Where do you get lactose? Where would you find it? What feed ingredient?
Dairy.
Dairy. So lactose is the main sugar that you're gonna find in milk. Do poultry and fish lactate? No, so they're not gonna have lactose. Even though you have, like, pigeons make crop milk, it's not lactose. It's some other concoction. So you're going to, if you give a lot of lactose to poultry, you're gonna end up with diarrhea. Some have tried to give lactose as what we call a prebiotic. So what bacteria do you think can break down lactose? You'll find it in yogurt.
So this is coli one of the strains that's in yogurt, like the good E. coli?
Maybe, but
That's all I can think
lactobacillus
Yeah, I would guess that.
can break down lactose. So some people will put lactose in poultry diets in a small amount as a probiotic to try and make it better for them.
Do they use like fungi or anything for probiotics before? To help break down certain things?
They give fungi.
Or like inhibitors, like that new, there's some new company out that,
They'll give inhibitors to inhibit fungi.
or I mean like actual fungi in the food, like maybe as a,
That's more ruminants, they'll do that. I don't know if they do that with poultry or fish.
yeah, I was just curious. 'Cause this new company just came out, that they're starting to sell like chocolate companies and dairy companies. It's pretty much like a fungus that inhibits your bitter taste receptors, so like you don't have to use any sugar, but they put this in there, it like takes the place, and you can't taste the bitterness from it. So, there was another one I saw that like helps break down other nutrients, and you like get the most out of it or whatever. I just didn't know if they did that in animals, yeah, like mycology type, so.
I'm gonna guess in some of them, I haven't seen much of anything in poultry, not saying that it isn't being done, but
Yeah, I was curious.
I know in ruminants that they feed that stuff, but that's part of their microbiome too.
Is it lactobacillus the one that causes mastitis in dairy cows? Actually, I think
What's mastitis?
It's an infection in the.
Mastitis.
I don't know if it's lactobacillus.
it just sounded familiar, so I was trying to figure it
I thought that was staph.
out. I don't quite remember. I just like.
Zach, you're more of our ruminant person. So Wednesday, I'll come get you and we're gonna set up our experiment. You guys will weigh the chicks and we'll tag them and put them in their respective pens,
I think the tags are using.
neck tags. So you guys ever do you've done neck tags?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't know if your grabs those.
Okay. You were in the,
Marburg last spring.
Oh, that's fun.
February.
No. Have you ever worked in retail? Putting the tags, those plastic
the little
tags?
guns.
Yeah, so that's what we do. We're.
The same thing they use for like hogs behind their ears, or whatever.
No.
Shoot.
Mm-mm. This is the same thing if you, when I
It's
was,
really like a gun with a needle in the front of it with another needle that pretty much sticks out, and you just stick it in your neck and then you just click it. And it's,
Oh, yeah, they do have those for hogs, don't they? They stick them on the ear. Or the Smithfield,
Yeah,
they
those
had
are-
something
They're not
like
as
that.
official looking.
I think those are actually.
I don't know, they left the tag behind.
Yeah, they're ear tags technically, that's what they're called.
Is the neck tag
Yeah.
smaller?
Yeah.
Is it like a collar or just?
No,
No.
you like literally stick it in the skin and then just